Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So an old man decides he wants to meet his grandson before he dies. He lives in the wilderness like a hermit, so he hardly ever meets anyone. So he invites his young grandson over to mark one item off his bucket list. His grandson arrives and notices his grandfather is scarred all over and missing some of his limbs. Most noticeably, one of his hands. "How did you lose your hand?" "A lion bit it off during one of my hunting trips." "Speaking of that, I was an avid hunter and have an impressive trophy room. Let me show you." The grandfather leads his grandson to his trophy room. It is filled with large animal heads mounted on the walls. The boy is in awe of all the different animals. There are lots of stories to tell with some of these. Several even attacked me before I managed to kill them. This leopard here, its name is Eerie. I named it that because it bit off my ear. I generally like to name them after something they took from me, so I remember our encounter better. As the boy looks around from animal to animal, he starts to ask about the stories behind them. "What about that great big crocodile? Does that one have a story?" "Yes, it took several of my toes, so I named it Toto." "What about this tiger?" "It took my eye, so it is named Iris." Then the boy's eyes are caught by an enormous lion, the most majestic trophy of them all. "That must be the lion that took your hand. Did you name it Hans?" His grandpa replied, "Good guess, but no, I named it Hancock." So a boy returns home from running an errand for his quarantined grandfather. He says, "Grandpa, I got all the groceries you wanted. Altogether, it came to $47.22. Here's your change." Grandpa says, "My goodness, the world is expensive nowadays. When I was a boy your age, I could get 5 pounds of potatoes, 3 loaves of bread, 2 pounds of beef, a jug of milk, a tin of tobacco for my dad, and a handful of my favorite candies, all for about 5 cents. Can't do that today, though." The boy asks, "Why is that, Grandpa?" His grandpa smiles and replies, "Too many bloody cameras." So Grandma and Grandpa were visiting their kids overnight. When Grandpa found a bottle of Viagra in his son's medicine cabinet, he asked about using one of the pills. The son said, "I don't think you should take one, Dad. They're very strong and very expensive." "How much?" asked Grandpa. $10 a pill," answered the son. "I don't care," said Grandpa. "I'd still like to try one. And before we leave in the morning, I'll put the money under the pillow." Later, the next morning, the son found $110 under the pillow. He called Grandpa and said, "I told you each pill was $10, not $110. "I know," said Grandpa. "The 100 is from Grandma." So, a naive young man was about to get married, and, feeling nervous about married life, he decided to ask his grandfather for some advice about making love. "Grandpa," he began, "how often do married couples usually make love?" His grandfather chuckled and leaned back in his chair. "Well, son, when you first get married, you'll want it all the time, maybe even several times a day. But as the years go by, it starts to taper off. Eventually, you'll be lucky to have it once a week. Then, as you get older, it drops to maybe once a month. And when you're really old, you're lucky if it happens once a year, maybe on your anniversary." The young man thought about this for a moment and then asked, "So, Grandpa, how about you and Grandma? How often do you guys do it now?" Grandpa grinned. "Oh, we only do it the oral way now." The young man looked confused and asks, "Oral? What's that?" Grandpa smirked and said, "She goes to bed in her room. I go to bed in mine, and then she yells, 'Screw you!' And I holler back, 'Screw you too.'" So 3 guys were sitting in a biker bar when Ben, already drunk, stumbled in and sat at the bar to order a drink. After a quick look around, Ben noticed the 3 men sitting at a corner table. He got up, staggered over to them, leaned in, and stared the biggest one right in the face. "I went by your grandma's house." Ben slurred and saw her in the hallway. Buck naked. "Man, she is fine." The biker looked at him but didn't say a word. His buddies were confused. This guy was a tough-as-nails biker, always ready to throw down at the slightest insult. But Ben wasn't done. He leaned in again and said, "I got it on with your grandma, and let me tell you, she's the best I've ever had." Still, the biker stayed quiet. His friends were starting to fume, wondering why he wasn't knocking this guy out. One more time, Ben leaned on the table and said, "And you know what, boy? Your grandma liked it." Finally, the biker stood up, grabbed Ben by the shoulder and said, "Grandpa, you're drunk. Go home." So a young man, looking utterly exhausted, sits down with his 80-year-old grandpa and begins to vent. "Grandpa, I'm at my wit's end. My girlfriend, she wants to make love all the time. I'm not kidding, it's non-stop. Every night when I get home from work, no matter how tired I am, she's ready to go. Even when I've had a long, grueling day and all I want to do is crash on the couch, she's there with that look in her eyes. At first, it was amazing. I mean, what guy wouldn't love a girlfriend who's always in the mood, right? But now, it's too much. I can't keep up. I need a break before I collapse from exhaustion. What should I do?" His grandpa frowns a bit and grumpily responds, "Just marry her already. That will put an end to that nonsense." So Grandpa was celebrating his 100th birthday, and everybody complimented him on how athletic and well-preserved he appeared. "Gentlemen, I will tell you the secret of my success," he said. "I have been in the open air day after day for some 75 years now." The celebrants were impressed and asked how he managed to keep up his rigorous fitness regime. He replied, "Well, you see, my wife and I married 75 years ago. On our wedding night, we made a solemn pledge. Whenever we had a fight, the one who was proved wrong would go outside and take a walk." So a girl is sitting on the couch with her grandpa and studying the wrinkles on his old face. She gets up the nerve to rub her fingers over the wrinkles. She touches her own face and looks more puzzled. Finally, the girl asks, "Grandpa, did God make you?" "He sure did, honey, a long time ago," replies her grandpa. "Well, did God make me?" asks the girl. "Yes, he did, and that wasn't too long ago," answers her grandpa. "Boy," says the little girl, "he's sure doing a lot better job these days, isn't he?" So, a grandfather was at the mall with his 5-year-old grandson last week, and they got separated. The grandson approached a uniformed policeman and said, "I've lost my grandpa." The cop asked, "What's he like?" The little boy replied, "Beer and women with big boobs." So I overheard my granddaughter arguing with her friend about whose grandpa was better. "My grandpa doesn't need a walking stick," she boasted. "Yeah, well, my grandpa can still drive," her friend replied. "Oh yeah?" she said as she puffed out her chest. "Well, My grandpa doesn't even use glasses. Her friend shook her head and replied, "That's not true." "Yes, it is," she yelled back. "He drinks straight from the bottle." So I asked my grandpa, "What's the secret to happy marriage?" He replied, "You can satisfy any woman with just 3.5 inches. It doesn't matter if it's Visa or MasterCard." So after I finally finished law school and told my grandpa that I became a lawyer, he didn't seem very happy. Matter of fact, he looked a little disappointed. When I asked him what's wrong, he said, "Kid, do you know what is the difference between a prostitute and a lawyer?" Then, after a short moment of awkward silence, he said, "There are things a prostitute won't do for any money in the world." So a man visits his grandparents and notices his grandfather sitting on the porch in a rocking chair, wearing only a shirt with nothing on from the waist down. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" "Your pecker's out for everyone to see," the man exclaims. The old man just stares off into the distance without answering. The man repeats, "Grandpa, what are you doing sitting out here with nothing on below the waist?" The old man slowly looks at him and replies, "Well, last week I sat out here with no shirt on and ended up with a stiff neck. This is your grandma's idea." So a grandpa tells his grandson, "All you kids do these days is play video games." "When I was your age," he continued, "my buddies and I went to Paris. We went to the Moulin Rouge and I made love to a dancer on stage. We didn't pay for our drinks all night, and when the bartender complained, we pissed on him." The grandson thinks his grandfather is right. He goes to Paris and the Moulin Rouge with his friends. He comes back 3 days later with a broken arm and covered in bruises. The grandfather asks, "What the hell happened to you?" The grandson says, "I did just like you did. I went to the Moulin Rouge with my friends. I tried to make love to a dancer on stage and piss on the bartender, but they beat the shit out of me and stole all the cash in my wallet." The grandfather asks, "Well, who the hell did you go with, boy?" The grandson says, "My friends from school. Who did you go with?" The grandfather says, "Oh, that explains it. I went with the 3rd Panzer Division." So, after my wife left me, I decided to ask my grandpa for advice. He looked at me and said, "Well, son, when a man steals your wife, the best revenge is to let him keep her." So one day, little Johnny asked his grandpa, "Why do women get belly button rings?" His grandpa thought about it for a second and replied, "I guess it's so they have somewhere to hang an air freshener." So 3 old grandmas were sitting on a bench outside the nursing home when an old grandpa walked by. One of the old grandmas yelled out, "Hey, we bet we can tell exactly how old you are." The old man said, "There is no way you can guess my age." One of the grandmas said, "Sure we can. Just drop your pants and undershorts and we can tell your exact age." Embarrassed, but anxious to prove they couldn't do it, he dropped his drawers. The grandmas asked him to first turn around a couple of times and then jump up and down several times. Determined to prove them wrong, he did it. Then they all said in unison, "You're 87 years old." Standing with his pants down around his ankles, the old gent asked, "How in the world did you guess my age?" Slapping their knees, high-fiving and grinning from ear to ear, the 3 old ladies happily crowed, "We were at your birthday party yesterday." So John went to visit his 90-year-old grandfather in a very secluded area of West Virginia. After a wonderful evening of catching up, John's grandfather prepared breakfast of bacon, eggs, and toast. John noticed a film-like substance on his plate and asked, "Are these plates clean?" His grandfather replied, "They're as clean as cold water can get 'em. Just go ahead and finish your meal, Sonny." For lunch, the old man made hamburgers. Again, John noticed tiny specks around the edge of his plate and asked, "Are you sure these plates are clean?" Without looking up, the grandfather said, "I told you before, Sonny. Those dishes are as clean as cold water can get 'em. Now don't you worry and eat your food." Later that afternoon, as John was leaving for a nearby town, his grandfather's dog started growling and blocking his path. John called out, "Grandpa, your dog won't let me get to my car." Without taking his eyes off the TV, the grandfather shouted, "Cold water, lay down now. You hear me?" So an old man and his grandson sit on a hill. The grandfather points to the houses around the hill and says, "Son, I build all those houses. Now tell me, am I known as the builder?" "No," says the grandson. The grandfather points to a beautiful tree garden and says, "Son, I planted all those trees. Now tell me, am I known as the gardener?" "No, grandfather," says the grandson. After a minute of silence, the grandfather says, "But you screw one sheep." So, on a hot afternoon, Scrooge the miser and his grandson, Tim, were walking home from a party. Tim complains, "Grandpa, it's still a long way back to our house. It's hot, and I'm tired. Look, there's a bus stop here. Can we please take the bus home?" Scrooge is aghast. "It'll cost us $6 to get home from here. What a waste of money. We'll walk it." Tim sighs, but he's a good kid and doesn't fuss about it. They barely walk a few feet when Scrooge sees a passing taxi and hails it. "How much would you charge to take us home to Springfield Avenue?" Scrooge asks the cab driver. "Springfield Avenue? Around $20, says the driver. "Oof, that's too much. We won't be requiring your services. Thank you." The cab drives off. Tim turns to his grandfather, exasperated. "Did you really think that a taxi to Springfield Avenue would cost less than a bus ride?" he asks incredulously. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course not." Scrooge scoffs. "Then why did you bother flagging down the taxi, Gramps? Foolish boy. We would have saved $6 by not taking the bus. Now we're saving $20 by not taking the taxi." So once upon a time, I was going through my late German grandfather's belongings and decided to donate his old clothes to a charity shop. I gathered all the clothes in a bag and brought them to the shop. As I handed the bag to the shop assistant, she started to look through the items. Suddenly, her expression changed to one of horror and anger. "How dare you bring this uniform to my shop?" she exclaimed. "This is a sick symbol of pain, shame, and humiliation." Embarrassed by her reaction, I quickly took back the bag and apologized. "I'm truly sorry," I said. I had no idea he was a Manchester United fan. So, a woman in a supermarket is following a grandfather and his badly behaved grandson. He has his hands full with the child screaming for sweets, biscuits, and all sorts of things. The grandfather is saying in a controlled voice, "Easy, William, we won't be long." Another outburst, and she hears the grandfather calmly say, "It's okay, William. Just a couple more minutes and we'll be out of here. Hang in there." At the checkout, the little horror is throwing items out of the cart. Grandfather says again in a controlled voice, "William, relax, buddy. Don't get upset. We'll be home in 5 minutes. Stay cool, William." Very impressed, the woman goes outside to where the grandfather is loading his groceries and the boy into the car. She says, "It's none of my business, but you were amazing in there. I don't know how you did it. That whole time you kept your composure, and no matter how loud and disruptive he got, you just calmly kept saying that things would be okay. William is very lucky to have you as his grandfather." "Thanks," says the grandfather, "but I am William. This little bastard's name is Kevin."